carry them or come back and reference anything, we'll get those.
Yeah, we'll get them uploaded so that you guys can put them on the site of how we want them.
So hopefully everyone's enjoying the delicious food provided by the Pollard. And for our lunch and learn, we have two communities that have been really focused on. And Ron and Shane, maybe we come up here just to get a little more friendly and not have some space in between us. But we have two communities that really have been looking at this resort tax for quite some time and had a really successful vote. In fact, I should pause for a second because I think there's a lot of really major successes at the ballot this year. We have some celebrations here and successes to share from the Hebgen Lake Resort Area District and then Big Mountain Resort Area District, Big Sky ourselves. We actually renewed our resort tax and suspended now until 2065. That was a big push for us. Gardner, I believe it extended their resort tax and not only the shoulder seasons, but also your time frame. Was there any other ballot initiatives that were out there this year for the resort tax? Not hearing any, but I know there will be some next year is my guess. What's that? Ours. Yeah, makes sense. I think so. But so with that, we have a series of questions here for Ron and Shane, and Ron did a great job of taking my prep questions and combining them all into a little bit of a presentation here. So, and Shane, I'll hit you up on the same questions, but Ron, let's start with your journey. I think that might be a good start.
I do have slides, because I think that way. I apologize. But I won't be, hopefully I'm not gonna read them aloud to you, like I can tell you the net. Let's see if this works.
No, yeah, it's gotta switch to. Ron, for the folks at home, will you be cognizant that the mic is kind of abandoned?
I will now. So if I'm talking to you, but I'm facing this way, you'll understand it.
Getting there.
You're up and running.
Okay, let's see. Oh my gosh, it works. Okay, so I'm on the Big Mountain Resort Area District. And we began our journey actually almost 5 years ago. Get to this one. Our tax starts June 1. So please hurry and come up and visit. We can have. So to look out, what's the journey or a trip? Well, one of the things that Merriam-Webster or American Heritage Dictionary says is it's a series of time series. And if you go to experts who know stuff like this, the Grateful Dead say, well, a long strange trip of things. So we're going to talk a little bit about the death of going stuff. I don't expect you to read this. I'll just kind of state it. We are a community of about 200 thereabouts. We have 152 qualified electors. We have very few children. We have about 325 to 350 short-term rentals and probably another 100 plus that are part-time and not rented as well as residents. We're comprised of Whitefish Mountain Resort and the immediate neighborhoods and businesses in that area. We are immediately north of the city of Whitefish, but it's just a little bit of strip of private land and other things separating us. Winter season is big, summer season become a big deal. You like downhill mountain bike or zip line, something is up. I can hear the screams, zip lines from my deck. Please come up. And there's the park, the city of Whitefish, the Flathead Dome. Our voters approved on May 7th of last year by a vote of 59 to 10, the formation of our district and the election of 5 board members. We were able to recruit 5 to 10 board members, so it's kind of an easy deal to go from being on the ballot to getting in there. We approved our 3% tax this January. So we went from May of being approved, I'll talk a little bit more about that journey, because there's a couple of letters in there, for those of you going through this process. We do not have the 1% yet, but I look forward to that after we've proven that we could demonstrate the use of our 3% well. Let's see, with the board, we meet every month. As chair, I drove us to meet twice a month for about the first 3 or 4 months. Not the most popular thing to do, we had a lot of work to do. So speak to that. And then for engagement, these are some of the questions from management, Danny. We have websites, we do physical posting of our agendas, we have it on our website. You'll do public hearings and notices in the papers. We have, I do special invitations to folks every month to make sure that they're there. So if you can't hear me, by the way, on the speakerphone, please let her know, let Tammy know, and she'll tell me that this talk better. So let's talk about don't look at this. You can't see the map of the district. You have to have a compelling need, right? And that's where we started. For us, it was our fire district 4 years ago, knowing that we were going to suffer tremendously in our 2005 ISO, Insurance Services Organization, audit of our fire department, because we no longer could manage a 4-person response to a structure fire. We had an insurance rating of 4, and they knew that because we didn't have volunteers anymore, and we didn't have funding for, PPEs, couldn't make that up, that we were going to suffer tremendously. Communities that have suffered like that either lose their insurance or their insurance rating goes even higher than it's gone, like astronomical. And the stories that you can hear just in our immediate area are phenomenal about that. So that is, as we call it, our learning platform. And the recognition of that was in 2021. Our fire district board started a bill levy task force to say, what can they do? And by the time 2022 rolled around, we said, well, we really need to do a strong resort area district. And so then they started a resort tax district committee. They stole resort tax language from this side, because you actually brand yourself as that, which is stunning. But brand yourself as tax, but kudos to you for doing it. Okay, so if you come back and stress your vision here a little bit, but basically we had a resort tax committee. They were planning, we got our Department of Commerce certification very early 2023. We're on our way, because we're wanting to get ahead of the insurance evaluation and have full staffing by 2024. They wanted to be on the ballot 2023. So they can work through the counties, and they want to get on the ballot for May of 2023 for our special election. And I only heard half of the rest of this, so I'm describing it. There were lots of discussions with our county attorney with big intervals of time between that committee and the county attorney's office. And so the intention of having an election in May of 2023 kind of moved out to May of 2024. They thought everything was alive. There was a lot of dialogue back and forth. I don't know the county side, I can't speak to that, but plan was go to 23. The reality was we did it 2024. And so we had our actual election. You'll see a little bit, see if I don't blind anybody with these stuff. I'll say, if you look down to the third to the bottom line, says first official meeting, and that's in the end of July, but our election was in early May. And we were getting ready to go, and so I'm watching I'm waiting for the Secretary of State's response back saying you're a bona fide, a special district and incorporated under laws, and you can start meeting officially. And after 2 weeks, I'm waiting, and I called Secretary of State. They hadn't seen anything county, so I sent a note out to and started interrogating the really good folks. But I can't say enough about their cooperation with us. And the answer is no, they didn't get any paperwork from the county. So that's right. So we can pull it up. So the contact county said, yeah, we're good to go. All we need is your meets and bounds. description. How many people here know what a meets and bounds description? Say, I didn't. We didn't have one. Our fire department, whose boundaries we stole. The contiguous with them did not have a meets and bounds description. And so for some of you saying, oh boy, meets and bounds is. Starting at this point, 26 paces yonder over to this tree. To, yonder over here and then north by northwest, 27 paces, so it's very detailed. But all we had was an area map. So that created about a 6-week loop of repair on my part. To get engineers on board and the cool thing was, I think the county showed us a lot of grace, because at the end, with the engineers who knew the county well, the engineers we hired, who knew the county well, they worked it out and basically said, what you have, this food this is good enough. And they forwarded it on to the state. So that could have taken months and months. It did take us 6 weeks, but I'm grateful for that. So it says a lot about maintaining good relationships all across the board. I think people were out of their way to help us. That start date is June of this month. So let's look at the future. If you take a look, I'm going to see the. I do this. One. Don't. The thing I'm the most proud of, you come down here, the red dot is roughly March 20 of this year, and it says resolution supporting BMFD. Our fire department submitted its plan back to ISO for how it was going to be fully staffed at the end of the period that it needed to show us improvements on it. So they had their plan, they're ramping up, and it was essential to them that we provide a statement saying, and we're there to backstop the funding. We are in effect the guarantors of the incremental funding necessary for them to meet the plan. And so if you go back 3 years, that's what we set out to do, was to make sure that our fire department would not lose its insurance rating, which is going from a 4 to a 10, which is a very bad direction. Because that's what they were told. And I'm really pleased that our process coincided with just when they needed to be able to send that message out. So that's where we are. We have also done, our resolutions, our ballot measure. But one thing we haven't done is our appropriation ordinance. We're going to do some visioning kind of work this summer with the community and other stakeholders. We'll go into working the appropriations ordinance this fall. We're looking at your various processes to help us do that. We have, we'll talk about some lessons learned. Any questions about process, boring stuff? Boring stuff, except when you're in the middle of it, things aren't going well. So, big lurch, of 6 weeks, but again, I can't say enough. That's all I had.
When do you think you're gonna start collecting resort tax?
Good one.
This year.
This year. Yep.
Ron, what were some of the support that was needed along the way? I imagine you needed a lawyer at some point.
We're coming to that.
Perfect.
In my own way. This is our, gotta be more than 100 words. Voter approved ballot issue, and when the slides will be available and you can find it online. But what I want to hit on are the words we use here, and it says to fund public safety, emergency services. I will read this: public transport, workforce housing, property tax relief, admin, infrastructure, or other public services programs or facilities benefiting the authority. Did I leave anything out? I love the term, I think Dave and others use today, and Richard Bay, and usually Bay, we try to be really broad. Because first, we have no money. We don't know how much we're getting back. We know we'll have much more funding than the fire department requires. By the way, their needs shifted out over time. I thought they'd need money this year, this calendar year. And that is shifted out to July 1 of 2026. the same looked at their budget, so. We're going to accumulate revenues during this coming year. We're not appropriating because we don't have so much. We're making up a budget. And it says a million, or I think it might be to say 10 million now, based on what I've heard about, under revenue project. But anyway, we don't know. The other thing to note is that we don't have percentages on our ballot plan. Right, so that will be incumbent upon us, they are appropriating ordinance conversation, so to do those, the public has to trust us. To do that, the fire district really has to trust us, and the mountain, Whitefish Mountain is already great, participants in our process, and great sayers too, and we need to hear it. That they need to know the fire department is covered for a very long time, and we'll do that through interlocal agreement, there's other things. As opposed to hard coding it into the ballot language.
How many communities hard coded it in the ballot? I know Gardner has some percentages of hard.
I get 1%.
Say for the percentages, and for those of you that are considering.
We, the only hard code we have on ours is the 5% property tax rule.
Okay. Just for those of you that are considering this is the balance we're talking about in terms of, how specific do you want to get versus more broad, and I think keeping it broader at the front end of the ballot language tends to be where most communities go, but it all depends on what your community is going to have appetite for. Richard, I know that public restroom visitor center facility with the rally cry, to a certain degree, Ron, fire district is what grows the rally cry, and something that you shame, like with EMS service.
So, and we talked about other things that we had. During the time where we couldn't legally meet, between May and July, we legally met without doing anything, meaning that we posted minutes, but we couldn't take any action because we didn't have the secretary state's confirmation that we existed. But we we were allowed legally to call a meeting, do it all properly, public notice, have community members come in and just talk to us about stuff, and emergency services weren't there, but workforce housing and public transportation came up as a big deal in our locale, so that is part of, I think, was the promise, hopefully over time. It does say property tax relief. Resort area districts, unless something's changed, are not required to give direct property tax relief. You're correct. So, resort communities such as Whitefish and our hosts here in Columbia Falls have to do a minimum of 5%.
Run the resort area districts, so can do property tax.
They can, yeah, we are allowed to.
That's sort of a question.
Our committee several years ago basically said we are going to do that. So our voters heard that promise when they voted on the original measure of the district.
Did you put a percentage in your ballot of property tax relief?
No, so we are obliged to address that somehow, and we'll be addressing that this fall. And we're right next door to Whitefish, which says 25%. We're right next door to Columbia Falls, which says 25%. And I gotta tell you, my heart is certainly not there to do that. I'm much more with the communities that said we're balancing needs and opportunity. So that's where I'm gonna come
Can I just
from.
make a comment there, and this is the challenge that you have with property tax relief. It really depends on where your base level is, and I think this is where we have some of this conflict, right? Because, let's say, for example, you go out and levy 50 mils for fire protection and then do a direct property tax relief. You could do 25% property tax, but if you're doing 20 mils for fire protection and then you're spending that same amount of money on fire protection, it still is property tax relief. It's just in a different form. So some of it's how you couch it and how you talk about it that really matters.
Well, and you heard Jay, our treasurer, very good guy, with a question today, and many of our very small voter pool assumes that property tax relief is seeing something on their, the property tax form at the end of the year that says reduction due to either a reduction in fire district mill levy numbers, or the issue he has is that the county wasn't giving us a separate line to say this is the reduction from the district. So we're looking at that, we're also looking at what other options do we have, and, TBD, to be continued, we'll look at that. I have no idea what, okay, so, whoops, advice. I love to listen to music, so, I will recast this in human words. But some music themes can be, so smoke on the water, which is, we have a burning issue, which happened to be our fire department. Right, so you have to have a compelling issue, in my view, to make this sell to your residents. There's gotta be not a slew of things, there has to be one very compelling thing. And fortunately, we had that, if you saw, I think we were 58-10 for our first election for the board and to the district, and 80-10 for a ballot measure. So the same 10 people weren't changed, but we found both who actually liked what we were doing based upon our communication. Do this, don't do that, take your redesign, there are a lot of rules. Right? And I gotta tell you, it is so important to be an expert in all of the related Montana code. And I'll show you what that is, that you can see it, take it up. But for those who just launching your processes or about to launch your efforts, you've got to know the code, especially if you're in a county that is not familiar with that, it's never got a resort area. I've found myself on several occasions, not about our county, but I've spent hours and hours looking stuff as I've been my board member. And they'll come up and say, well, can't do this, and then I burn all night, I write a 10-page thing, I boil it down to 3 pages, and come back and say, well, go, yes, we can, here's the thing, oh, okay. No, that takes a week, but you have to do that, you have to do that for your collectors, you have to know it for, processes, you have to know it, to stay out of jail and to stay out of headline. Right, bad, we'll come back to that. Taking care of business and working overtime, we have a great board. We have a working board. We have been working since basically May of last year as volunteers. Our treasurer's been working his tail off lately. Our secretary and our vice chair have jobs. We have one non-officer director. He's got kind of an easier job, but he also takes assignments and does stuff. So the board members, so let's put on if you do that. For the first year, before you have money, you've got to have folks support. And give us a list. We have a great board. I could not be happier. So that, tell me what you want, and I'll give you what you need. I'll give you to understand. Oh, my son insists that there is new music created after 1979. I cannot accept that. So, you're not gonna see any references. And I'm sorry, I couldn't find any kind of line here that they won't touch. Something about it. But we also have to have a value proposition from all our other major stakeholders. Whitefish Mountain Resort didn't ask for this tax, but they care intensely about the fire department. They care intensely about the property insurance rates for themselves and for the community. But we still have to say, we need to work together to make sure the benefits also reach you. To our season pass holders in the valley, we work 3 jobs. So they can afford a ticket, and we're gonna see a $25 hit on their season pass. Because of our tax. I feel like you will have a value proposition for each one of those folks. And you will hear me say that on chairlifts and else. If it comes up, so our appropriations, a couple of years from now, we're going to have to be able to show people what they're getting for their investment. Whether they're property, residents in our community, or the folks who pay the bills that come in and get plugs these taxes. And then a big stack of bills that gets bigger every day. We have no money. Okay. Imagine my surprise, our election was in May, and I developed a very good working relationship with our elections department, they're fabulous folks. And in late June, I get a bill for $1,800. It said, please pay for the election. I looked at that going, oh, I never thought about that. And, we had a meeting, I bring it up, and we're all saying, oh, we can, we're already starting to, pass the hat and just buy some stuff. That, essential things that were necessary. We're just paying for themselves and look at this bill and say, well, I'll just, buy it. Well, county language says, do not say, buy an election, say, pay for the administration. So I call the county, and I call the election and say, can I write you a personal check? And they say, well, call the treasurer's office, we'll call them that. 30 seconds later, they're gonna call back saying, oh, absolutely, don't take it personally. So the treasurers are on their job. I have accountants pay for it all, expert. So you've gotta find an attorney, you've gotta find an accountant. Even before you know how you're gonna pay for them. And they will work with you, God bless them, to do that. We've spoken with several attorneys, got some great free advice. I have working with one now, he's willing to push out his billings until, at least we got our loan, because we did get a loan. Oh, gosh, I'm gonna say in August. So that we could go begin to spend money, but we actually didn't reimburse ourselves back for stuff until the voters approved the election in January. So we didn't pay ourselves back for anything. Our account, by the way, is Susan Nicosia. So many of you know Susan, and the best thing to happen in my life since this process has started was Susan becoming available and us finding her. She is both our accountant and our advisor. She was the city manager for Columbia Falls. She was the treasurer for the Resort Tax District, if I recall right. She was the mayor before that. She knows a boatload, and she's also a straight shooter. Really a delight to work with her. And I bring her chocolate bars. And most of the time I see her with dark chocolate, huckleberry, and sea salt. Because I was in there. Move on up toward your destinations. You make mistakes in this process. I am hugely self-critical. And so you've got to listen for feedback and get better. Some of the best feedback I've gotten from my own performance has been from my board members. And I welcome it and I appreciate it. And I usually get around acting on it. And not quite as quick as I should, but it's been enormously helpful. And then others will give you advice too. And we've learned as a board, so it's that's really good. Another Dooney Brothers, listen to music, listen to everybody. Right, and you've heard that theme here at community meetings and talking. We talk to our, you and our neighbors, Whitefish, and our residents, and we'll be doing more of that. Good ideas come from all sorts of places. And they may come from the business owner who says, don't start your tax in March 1, please start it in June, because I don't want my servers to have to explain why there's this new 3% bill on the tax. Boy, that hits you here. Not to say, please don't do that, because that's gonna create a mess and stuff like that, and that hits you, kind of here. But when, restaurant owner says, my servers are gonna be having, these conversations 30 times a day while they're trying to serve food, during spring break season. Okay, we understood that. Finally, there is a finally. Let's see.
I had one for you before you left that
Yep.
page though.
Yep.
Aretha Franklin did step in for Pavarotti at the Grammys one year,
Yeah.
Candace Rourke, Nessun Dornum.
Yep.
Nobody is sleeping. That's nice, right into here.
If you have never seen that video, please go look up Aretha Franklin and
Nessun Dornum.
yeah, unbelievable. This one we can sing anything, right? And she doesn't know Italian, and she's not a trained opera singer, but she has a voice. So can't commend that highly enough. Just don't have to look at it. Know this stuff. Make sure your chair knows all of this stuff really well, and your other board members. So 4 sections of code. Everything that the MSU local government center can provide to you, training or online stuff, do take, learn, download. You've got a jail, you've got a trouble, you've got a bad headline. Right? Really, really crucial. I have been an elected official in the past and county appointed official as well. And, I know what it's like to be on the awkward end of things. That's part of why I'm in this process. And, you want to know that. I think my last slide now is, the self-appointed unofficial ambassador to the Big Mountain Resort Area District. We have the future one. Wow. What I tell people, and quoted in the paper on this, 2 years from now, I want people to be asking, why you didn't do this a decade ago, 15 years ago? I want to be able to show that immediate value. 20 years from now, we're, independent, we will have made a dent in housing, we will have made a dent, pretty immediate dent in transportation. We have hundreds of workers who work free going, 2 jobs even during the season to be able to help all of us in the business have fun. So if we can do that, I'll be grateful. Assuming we're still independent from the city of Whitefish, I think we'll be complimenting them from the get-go on how they're investing towards housing, how we could be doing that instead of figuring that out jointly rather than contentiously. Because there is a move on the part of some of the council members for the annexation, and there's evaluating that. That doesn't exist in codes, that's a different dialogue, but the staff down in the city, White Fish, have been terrific. For work that is, and think of some futures, those are the bigger ones. They can
Ron, how big was your team that you were? I mean, you carried a lot of the weight, I know, but I know you also had a cadre of folks that have been helping you.
Well, we had 5 people on our original tax committee. And then separately, because many of them are on a fire board, and just off the fire board, we have 5 board members new to their roles. So that's been pretty much our workload, plus all of the kind folks we've spoken to.
Juxtapose that with Shane and what he was doing down there at Hebgen Basin, I suspect your team was small, it might have just been you.
So it was basically, my few of my board members were out, talking about it, and a couple members from the district, but, it's primarily me leading the charge out the whole way. This whole going down the road for getting the rules of area taxi in place, I mean, it was to meet the needs of fire department. And so, I think since 2021, our total money, 2021 jumped up 25%. That stayed level. Last year jumped up another 12%. So our line was about 39% overall. As we get older, they say, of the housing department, invested in volunteers, so volunteers small down. Next year, people are having an issue, and so that's forcing me to hire more staff. So I needed some sort of mechanism to provide a stable funding source, and so I started this. I started working at it, talking about it. I should April, but I really did this on here. And so in May, and so went out of petition. Some of the license problems, county attorney's office, got it approved. Then had the county commissioners asked them to write a letter of support to Department of Commerce, trying to get involved from designation study. And my goal was to get it before the voter this May, and so we were able to beat that.
How long did it take for them to part of the commerce?
Well, I felt that I've been had a conversation. Don't make me back in conversation. People have really interested in doing. I wanted to find something to do. And I had some study done, like October 7th, right before our last job. So yeah, so I got these things worked out that yeah, so not valid. The voters on May 6th, and 460 ballots sent out, 106 of the league back, and now back the way I got it. Started doing the petition, I went out and I West Yellowstone was the first resort tax community, most of our people are used to it, somewhat. First show, people started talking about creating a new resort tax. Well, no, I don't want big tax. It's like, no, this is so you don't have big tax. This is so we can put the burden on the church. Because for years now, and it only changes by 1% or 2%. Roughly 75% of what I do is church. 25% is local. And so when looking for a long-term funding source, how do I go out? I mean, I can't consciously go out to my voter, say, hey, I need you to run that, I need money, let them know that you, so the fund, the fire department. But you're on 25%, what they do, the tourists are 75. So that's why I concentrated my message, for the tourists, not, the taxpayers, and fulfill my funds. And then, we had this really started, around January 1st, right after the new year. I put out a letter, to everybody in the community, rural area, what it's about, what we're doing, and then, starting kind of social media campaign, and I don't do social media, so I had somebody else do that for me. Of course, social media is where all the experts are. And so, there's a community forum and everything, and so I would ask my Liz, my administrative assistant, I said, hey, when you get a chance tonight, go online and tell me what's on the forum. So she print off all the information, come back, and I mean, there was some way wrong information. And so, I went out and talked to them. Yeah, this is, I see you've been pretty vocal, give me a chance, I want to explain what we're doing. At the end of it, you don't like it, so be it, but I want to make sure you have all the right information. And so, some of our keyboard warriors, had really vocal, after I went and did that, they're totally switched. And this makes no sense. And then, we did two community meetings, and of course, community meetings, in this day and age, you never know what you're gonna get, more than likely, not a whole lot. And so our first community meeting, I think we had 11 people, and the second community meeting, we had 2. And so, it's real with a lot of calls, making up to right before the vote, people come by the office, complain, and ask some questions, and put it up. Even, and so.
It's a real pro tip. I mean, if you can take your most vocal opposition and somehow harness them as an advocate for the other, like that goes so far. And I think you probably had some of those experiences as well. And you're right, you have to hit it head on. And hey, we have a conversation, you framed it perfectly. We have a conversation. At the end of the conversation, you still don't agree, that's fine, but I want to make sure you have the right facts.
Yep.
Misinformation is
Well,
a funny thing.
and so, and so, I track, I mean, the only way that I can feel good about the information, and when I go to town council or my board, is to provide good quality data. So we track our EMS reports, whether they're the district, not the district, whether those calls are happening. Yeah. So we have, the way we came about was years ago. We had the rural fire district and town of West Yellowstone had no fire department. And so in 2007, the town went through an ISO re-rating. And they're on 7 of 10. And so then we put together a study commission and they put to do. And so that study commission come back and said, hey, we think, man, I should take it. Well, at that point in time, we were strictly all volunteer department. And it's like, oh, I don't know if there's my kid in this, you know, we didn't do EMS. And, but you gotta look at it as, you know, by economy and scale. You know, combining manpower, equipment, and resources, we can do a better job, and so it creates a partnership. And so that has done us well over the last few years.
And then too, you have the local media. So, you know, once you become a potential headline and say they're going to do this, you know, your newspaper editors will call and do interviews with you. And you put on your best lawyerly like face and try to be very, very precise, and then you see what's printed. Right, and again, it's not dealing with experts, and so you roll with it and you say, do I want to try and correct this nuance, recognizing that they actually have a perfectly legitimate way to represent stuff. So you roll with it, and you ask questions about it, you answer it, move on. So don't get bogged down by any one thing that doesn't go exactly the way you like to see it.
What surprises did that interview run into? Was there anything that was like, oh my gosh, I should have known?
Well, when I first started in the MCA, and, you guys read through the MCA. It tells you about the process, the petition and everything else. It doesn't really discuss qualified designation study. And so, you know, I reached out to you and you provided great advice, great information, took the information and I mean. There's enough of us have done this. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. Right. Steal, beg, borrow, you know, take the languages from everybody's, what they have done. And make it your own. Yeah. And so as of Monday, the county commissioners, Kansas and Moses, and made the resolution. Creating a rural pure tax district, and now that talks right in the Secretary of State's office, and so now we're in the process of you know, we'll have to meet as a board, pick who's the chair, vice chair, and sort of work through that process. And so if I want this to be successful, I'm still. I mean, I'm not a part of either one. I'm the fire chief, but I'm gonna stay and help get this up and running. Yeah. And whatnot. And so gotta go through all of that process and so there's a lot of, I mean, we've done a lot of work so far, but there's a lot more work to be done. And you know, it was in our ballot language and resort tax could start collecting June 15th of this year. Well, we ain't gonna meet that. There's no way we're gonna meet that. But it's like, all right, we're gonna put a date in here and then we're gonna adjust it with the resolution later. So that we can start moving forward.
Polson, Ennis, Fort Smith. You have two live examples of this thing getting implemented. What questions you have, discuss. Our county.
Our challenge is gonna be finding people who, you know, tiny community like ours who would be able to
Serve on the board.
Well, and so, as I was going around collecting signatures, whether people are around collecting signatures, you know, that, you know, when I collected all the signatures, they said, hey, so-and-so said they're interested in being on the board. And so, when we got it to actually gonna be on the vote or on the ballot, that had indicated they're interested, sent them applications and I sent applications, I don't know, 8 or 10 people, 5 people actually completed them. So then, of course, there wasn't an actual election, they got it through acclamation. One of the biggest persons that was totally against this. I kind of put them on the spot because you know, one, they're a business owner and they use our services a lot. And so I went and I said, well, you know, you know how much you pay taxes to the fire district, right?
And he's like, no, I pay lots of money. And so I'm like, well, no, you actually pay this. And I mean, it's very a little amount of money. And so a number of years ago, I had went through and you know, before I went down this road, about 14% of my call volume was Yellowstone National Park. So they call, well, we got a car wreck, you know, we need you for mutual aid. Well, turns out therefore, you know, when I get to looking at it, but 14% of my call volume. Well, that's 14%, you know, that was, you know, that's costing the taxpayer of my dollars. And so it took me 5 years, but I finally got a contract for service with Yellowstone Park. And so I had went through and had to determine what does it cost? What does it cost me per month? And so it's when they looked at this contract, they, you know, it was a national contract and nobody put it on. They looked at this contract and we want to know what you're gonna charge us per hour for an unknown number of calls, for an unknown number of duration of hours, but give us an hourly price. Okay, how am I supposed to figure that out? And so I was gonna figure out what it costs me to have equipment, manpower, gas, fuel, everything. And it's surprising, it costs right at $4,000 for every call we run. To pay for the overhead, the capital, everything else. So I took that by the number of calls that we typically run. And I figured out an hourly price. And so we submitted the contract. And now the park is 9% of my call volume, 9% of my revenue. So my $4,000 a call is my money. I assume to draw a contrast, Art, you said your board was elected by, or was just by acclamation approved, so they weren't on the ballot. Our county required us to have our 5 board members on a ballot because their interpretation was that you can acclaim people if you're already existing. And you have you know, one person for one position, but you can't do that if you're starting a new board. And so they stated different state law to me there. So the FYI. It's all, state law is all about interpretation.
Exactly. I guarantee you, 2 of us in a row that the counties probably deal with varying degrees of interpretation. It's kind of funny, but.
Well, I think, you know, with all the different in Gallatin County, they do election. I learned a lot on Monday when I was at the meeting, but there was like 26 different variations of ballot, depending on where you're located. So if you were in town, you have to vote on the school election. If you are in the rural area, you have to vote on the rural area district and school. And so there's multiple versions of that. So yeah. I'm quite sure that anybody they can get rid of some of that work.
What else you got, Alan?
We were told by our attorney, he's referred from you guys, that we only had 2 or 3 board members and it was approved on that ballot. Yeah, then we could appoint by acclamation additional board members to stand for election later.
Yeah.
But that's our attorney, Ellen. I'm wondering if we should talk to the county attorney.
We should.
I guess if there's an election process back, then your bylaws or the ordinance that sets it up, that basically says how you deal with vacancies. So if you have an election, get 3 and you still have 2 vacancies left.
Yeah, something, we've been dealing with a lot. We've sadly lost a community member who was serving on our board. We went through this process of trying to refill that position, and the way the law is written, it's up to the folks on the board to determine who replaces it, and then we tried to do a fair process of we were gonna open it up for a call for request, go through the resumes, and don't ever do that. It was, you know, when I think about what this collective group might be able to bring to the table, like that's a small tweak in code, but in my opinion, we could run a special election just to refill that role, instead of putting that responsibility.
board, if we really have. Like with the fire district, if there, you have a vacancy, county commissioners, you want to take out nomination. County commissioner, one, that person, and then that person serves until the next election, none of that special. So like, normally I have 2 board members a year, like this should be up to 3.
Yeah. The only challenge I would say is that is, you know, maybe start looking, especially for a small district with $6,000 or $7,000 bill, I guess it's gonna be less, it's a bit small district, but I know, like for us to run special, that's, it's like $6 grand. So
it's just an option.
Yeah, so that becomes,
Yeah.
Something else considering the small communities, we're, we said we're 152 electors, my guess is roughly 200 folks that are residents. We have our water district is privately held by the mountain, so that's not an issue. We have a sewer district, we have a fire district, sewer district board, fire district board. There's a resort area district board and 5 or 6 HOAs. So you are suddenly now taking the entire talent pool and consuming them in these things. So finding folks to work is getting harder. Because, you know, we're getting all the warm bodies and we got a fabulous job with our district, but it's getting harder.
How much overlap do you have between our boards?
There's no overlap between my board or our board and the sewer board and the fire district board. Our attorney says I have to say, but I do live with a fire district board member and we can't talk about stuff. But I think I've got 2 HOA presidents on our board. Oh, and then there's the Firewise board. And then there's the HOA president on at least each of the other boards. So there is some, you know, public interest incest going on that has to, because these are all folks contributing that. Well, that didn't sound bad.
Great question.
Well, the other thing I'd like to mention is that, where I was going through with my store, and I got sidetracked. The gentleman who was super opposed to this, I said, well, you know, if you don't like this, and you're concerned, why don't you get on board? Yeah, oh, no. So, yeah, it's, put it back on him.
What about, community engagement? Did you send out mailers? Were there any, did you have literature or anything? Public meetings.
We did the letter, every.
Okay. Ron, did you?
But we've done, since the election, we've done 1 letter. We have a highly used, we have our own website now, and I failed to mention where to go. End of June, people can make their payments online through GovOS and some other things, and so we've come a long way. But we have a big mountain community website that can all the HOAs feed into, and it's pretty heavily trafficked. And so we make sure that our agendas and our announcements are there, and we see hits from that, we see hits directly, they come to our website, and we physically post. So people know a fair amount of what's going on. One thing I should note is, you know, when you first start this, and you talk about taxing people, the enthusiasm level is like not very good, especially for folks who aren't in your district and are gonna be paying tax and get interesting emails and stuff. But as you start having the prospect of having money, you get friends showing up at meetings that you didn't know about, and they are showing up repeatedly. And it's really good because I'm learning about other meetings, and they're also explaining what they do. Dream, great program on the mountains, our adaptive ski and outdoor recreation program, summer and winter. Please look it up, wonderful folks. But you know, they're saying we need, if you're gonna do something, do a constant flow, right? Don't do this to us. Don't, you know, we're getting those from the nonprofits or the bus group or other folks, so. But it's nice to have friends who are at meetings, happy to see you there.
Well, you know, I think the big thing to consider, also as you're moving forward, especially when you're going after that, qualified designation. You know, and if you're looking to do an area or a district, you know, it's easy to meet the first two, requirements that, you know, like 2,500 and I'm incorporated there. The third part of that is the 51%. So basically tourism has to be, the tourism industry has to be the economic engine. And so when they do that study, they're pulling information from census. And so like when they did that, when they pulled that information, there was like between $9 and $19 million in rental income in the rural area of the district. Okay, well, you need to define that. So how do you define that? That it's just rental income. And so if it is a house and I own a house, I'm renting this house, so that's long-term rental and then work my retirement income, how I find it. Then that income doesn't count against it. But there's not a good way, it doesn't separate out value rental versus long-term rental. And so, the Department of Commerce uses, a software called, Airbnb. And so so they're going to see how many rentals there are. And so, a big percentage of that is night rentals. My district, because I got one entire subdivision that is nothing but night rentals. So that 51%.
The biggest pushback we had early as we were forming, once we were elected, are the property owners who are not residents and business owners up on the mountain that are not residents saying, why don't we get a vote? Right, so you have people who own millions and millions of dollars, multiple units of property out there, and they're saying, how come I didn't get a vote on this? They're doing short-term rentals or other. And that's why I will point you to, let's see, Title 13, Elections Chapter 1, the second item, qualification of voter. Right, because you actually have to remind people how our democratic process works. And so I'm talking to somebody who owns a bunch of property and they're in Georgia. And they say, I should have a vote. And they say, you do. You have a vote in Georgia. And let's talk about, tell me the level of fire service you have in Georgia and what your property is. So you have to go into that kind of conversation to educate people. And this is a special district of government, still under the aegis of the state of Montana. You can keep reiterating that. And there are folks for whom that is a really, really tough thing to swallow. And will be until they start, I think, seeing results out of it.
Well, and I have the same issue. We have the same issue today. It's like, I didn't break the law on that part of it.
And I asked if I could vote in their special district elections, and they said no.
Did you want to touch on the MSU local government? I'm glad you had that on there.
Yeah, others also, I can speak to specifics, but we've taken classes and our board members had, it was really cool when we took, one class from Ashley, who works with, I think, Dan. And two of our county commissioners are also sitting in the class. I hope it's a refresher for them, but, again, on open meetings and process. Great questions. A lot of fire departments show up, a lot of rural fire districts are, heavy into good governance, which is great. They have a lot of online stuff. If you ask Ashley for scripts of how to run meetings, she's got that, how to deal with difficult stuff. They have their own more humane interpretations of how to conduct open meetings without going into the language of the law and really help you.
Anyone else have anything to add? On to the experience of forming one of these things, Richard, you had from, it's been 10 years, but.
No, I can get into my points. It's totally if you try to impose a resort tax from outside, it's gonna fail and it should. It has to grow organically. You pointed out, first you gotta have an issue to get a core thing that brings people together on it. And that's key to getting this passed and it's key to sustain.
And you gotta convince them, do you wanna pay for all of it, or do you only wanna pay for 30% of it, let the other people pass it, pay for the other 70%?
Well, I would say, well, you know, because, the first from, well, Miller, well, you know, you know, that's, you go to the, that's, you know, another, you know, 5,000 people that's older, that first, you know, would you rather have $15,000, than they have,
You don't fire.
One thing's for sure, if this building catches on fire, we're.
Yes.
I just, as someone who has only ever worked in the arena where the resort tax is already in place, and I just had to learn how to do it. I'm appreciating the fact that there's like someone had to do that last work. You know what I mean? And like my sales snow is first, and I don't ever forget the people that made that trip. And there's just a lot of work that's involved and takes some fortitude.
Yep, and it took Red Lodge 3 taps, did West Yellowstone get it on the first time? So, yep.
That was B6, I don't know.
They're, West is the. West led the charge of, holiday again. Yellowstone. And, okay.
Is that what you're heading?
Yes. And so, you know, speaking from a person who grew up in West Yellowstone, 4 streets, 4 sidewalks. And seeing the transformation of the community. There is, like, as far as the services that are offered. Quality of fire capacity, quality of the streets.
You have streets.
Yeah, but even, you know, snow removal and everything that goes along with. It has been transformation. I remember as a kid, bringing Ron on. Then going on, all of a sudden, Kurt said, "Fight outside, you got some things now." And we got, you know, 3 feet of water standing everywhere, ground still flowing, no storm sewer. There's a guy doing it down, fire. That is, you know, when we got storm sewer, that was transformation.
Gentlemen, thanks for sharing your experience. What else? What are your remaining thoughts?
Montana has some world-class ski areas. We have Red Lodge. What a beautiful mountain to come up over the rise and to look at that. See, I thought, yo, I'm up too late. If I have a backcountry skier, so I'm willing to hike, you know, up 3,000 feet to get 500 feet of vertical. So, in Big Sky, and if you're not familiar with Whitefish Mountain Resort, and what used to be called Big Mountain, please come up and visit. The unofficial mascot for the mountain ranger with my dog will be happy to have you come with him to those ski days. He greets everybody that I can meet, but so great summer place, great winter place, great side place, stay up on the mountain, stay in town.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Ron, what does his badge give from access to?
Ego. You know, feel free to call him.
So we'll take a 35-minute break.
Make sure to show us that thing. It's just like. So cute. You gotta show her the picture that you showed me last night.
So I had to work the dog in.
You should.
Thank you, Tammy.
Your dog is so good.